A very good morning to you. This is the SA Morning. Our focus throughout the day here on eNCA is the state of infrastructure in schools around the country. Now, World Teachers' Day was commemorated a little bit earlier on this month. The Basic Education Minister, Angie Motshekga, admits that there is still an infrastructure backlog, and we are seeing it. Our learners are experiencing it, and so are the teachers as well. Today, we'll be breaking this down and taking a look at the state of infrastructure, but not only that, but its impact on learning as well. Joining us this morning is Basil Manuel from the Teachers Union Naptosa. Good to have you with us this morning, Basil. Now, when we think of education and we think of the state of schools in South Africa, how much progress has actually been made since that 2013, norms and standards that was put in place?
Good morning, Tommy, and thanks for having me. Tommy, I think that is where we sometimes are unfair, because it is not easy to see progress when you yourself have not moved. And very often the criticism comes from the place where people haven't seen it themselves, so they can't believe that it has happened. But in reality, from 2013 to now, there has been huge changes, particularly when one thinks of the eradication of mud schools, the number of schools that have been built throughout the country, and ablutions, of course. A large number of ablution facilities. Water access has been improved greatly. So those are just to mention a few. But even so, we are fighting, we're on a treadmill. It's as though we are not making any progress, because notwithstanding all these massive improvements, we are having the ravages of climate. We are having people that are vandalizing and burgling the schools and destroying the infrastructure. As it becomes developed, it becomes broken down. And then, of course, age and the lack of maintenance. And that is also counting against us in huge ways. So are we better off? Yes, certainly we are. Is everybody seeing it? No, we are not all seeing it. And of course, that is what is impacting on the lives of learners and teachers.
The norms and standards, Basil, that were put in place in 2013, some of the milestones there is that pit latrines would be eradicated by the year 2022. And that has not been achieved as yet. The minister has moved that deadline. One of the issues that was also spoken about in that 2013 norms and standards is the number of pupils in each class. I think the number is 40 across the board. That is the accepted number, whether it's urban or rural schools. That also is a milestone that doesn't seem to have been reached. Talk to us about, I guess, the processes that are put in place. Yes, you mentioned that there was progress done, but the milestones certainly are not being reached. How do we react to that? How is the department reacting to that, and yourselves as teachers too?
It's been a target that everybody thought could be met. And in fact, Naptosa still believes that we should have met that target. We know that we are far off the mark, even though in the last few years, a lot has been done, particularly with ablution facilities. But by the same token, we are seeing that there is still infrastructure money in provinces being returned to Treasury. We've seen that in the last couple of years. Now, that is criminal when we know that small projects like the ablution facilities could have been attended to better. Bigger projects like the building of schools, one understands, is far more complicated. But even then, so we are saying there is a governance failure. It's a failure to ensure that things happen when they should happen. And we hear a refrain of the same complaints all the time. No, we don't have quantity surveyors, and we don't have this professional and that. But we can't constantly be stuck there, because what that does is it then postpones everything, as though the excuse is more important than doing the actual job. So yes, governance and senior management failure must come into play. But it's the will to get things done. We can't say that after having spent 30 years at this, one cannot yet see the end. And one has seen devastating things happen just with toilets and how lives have been lost. But it's a recurring phenomenon because also with the destruction of infrastructure that happens from time to time, we then have to do more to achieve the same thing. Insofar as overcrowding is concerned, that is a serious matter. Now, of course, there are those provinces that have special pressures where there's an influx. One would like to understand that, but let's be very careful that one does not make that the primary excuse. If a place is overcrowded, we don't want children at home, we want them in school. But it can't take a year to decide to bring in a mobile classroom as a stopgap measure. That there is just failure of foresight, failure of management, failure of governance to actually plan for that. We know the pressure.
I'm quite relieved to hear you speak about stopgap measures. For example, the minister has said that 70,000 classrooms or so are estimated to be needed. Just recently in the Eastern Cape, a young boy, Ulangalamviki, died in a pit latrine toilet. We are still seeing that to this day. And because the infrastructure has not been put in place, what are the interim measures that can actually be put in place while we're waiting for the brick and mortar classrooms, while we're waiting for proper toilets that actually have a flushing system?
Let's just put this into a context. When it comes to toilets, there are some problems with flushing systems because some places don't have running water. So we've got to find the best fit for a particular area. But it can't be that pit latrines are still remaining there, or rather the unsafe pit latrines. There are stopgap measures. We've seen them work in some areas. Similarly, we've seen mobile classrooms erected because, Tommy, you've got to understand as well that if you don't attend to some of these other things break down. Schools have been designed for, let's say, 700 learners. Now you have 1,500. Those toilets can't cope. The simple handles on a classroom door can't cope with opening and closing. So the facility starts breaking down much quicker. Add to that the lack of finances for upgrading, upkeep, the maintenance. And then you're sitting with a disaster where what you've had as a good structure starts crumbling in no time, by the sheer pressure of what is in there now. And we know that sometimes it's unavoidable, but you can't leave it like that.
Certainly. Thank you so much for your time and your insight this morning as we continue looking at the state of schools and their infrastructure. That was the president of the National Professional Teachers Organization of South Africa.